So we're going to go ahead and get started with our study today. And today's study title is The Spirit of the World. The Spirit of the World. It is a dangerous spirit. It is a spirit that is so easy to get caught up in. We know that Yahweh delivers us from the kingdom of darkness, from every unclean thing. He sanctifies us to be His children. And we're very blessed to have the Spirit of Yahweh dwelling in us. And that's what we need to be after. The things that are not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit of Yahweh. The Spirit of peace, hope, and the way of righteousness. If it wasn't for Yahweh's Spirit, we'd just be a bag of dead dust. But Yahweh breathed in us His life so that we would have the breath of life. He wants to fill us with life eternally. And we were created to be in His image. Now man did not choose to walk in His image, but praise Yahweh for the Messiah Yeshua, who does walk in the image of Yahweh and always has. And so there are two kinds of spirits in this world we got to really watch out for. Our own spirit, which happens to be tuned sometimes to the wrong entity, and then the spirit of the world. Now Yeshua said in John 6:63, one of my favorite scriptures, "It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh profits nothing. The words that I speak to you are spirit, and they are life." Think about that. Just meditate on that. How the Messiah's words are actually spirit. Now the word spirit comes from the Hebrew word ruach, and ruach means breath. And with our breath, we speak words. Some will speak the words of life. Some will speak the words of death. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. When Yeshua spoke, the words He spoke were spirit, and they were life. And so when we read His words, we are taking in His Spirit. Think about that. When you read His words, you are bringing His Spirit into you. And so think about that for a moment, because what if you listened to the wrong spirit and you received that wrong spirit, the wrong kinds of words, the words that did not bring life? Brothers, that's the spirit of the world. And we cannot allow the spirit of the world to plant things in our heads that are not from Yahweh. We need to cause any uproot, any kind of thing that may be taking root, to have crop failure. We've got to uproot those plants and reject them in the name of Yeshua the Messiah. You know, the things that we take into our minds, the things that we regard to be entertainment, can affect the way we walk and the way we think. Because the kind of spirit in the world today is an unclean spirit. And instead of love, it brings hatred. Instead of peace, it brings confusion. Instead of hope, it gives hopelessness. Instead of righteousness, this unclean spirit gives us wickedness. And we need to reject it. That's what does not bring life. Now, if we are filling our heads and our minds and our hearts and writing the words inspired by the spirit of Yahweh's enemy into our hearts often, and filling our minds with His things, and spending our time in the things of the enemy, then we're going to have a really hard time being an overcomer spiritually. And a lot of times that is the things that really are what's standing in the way of us getting victory. So the spirit of the world has a certain characteristic about it. I want you to pay attention to this characteristic, because this is exactly how I think is an accurate description, and how Yahshua actually described it. Thorns. You see, as a spirit that entwines, intertangles, slowly destroys, little by little, bit by bit, until the word of Yahweh, the Spirit of Yahweh, is no longer able to bear fruit. It blocks out the sunlight as the thorns slowly grow, and then there's no more room for Yahweh anymore. And that is the danger, brothers. That's the danger that we really have to be aware of, especially in the age we live today. It's amazing how the spirit of the world is just seemingly taking over the hearts and minds of men. You know, I've heard it said, you put a frog in a pot of boiling water, you know, you've heard the story, he'll try to jump out, but if you put a frog in water and just slowly raise the temperature little by little, he won't even know anything's happening until he's dead. That's the spirit of the world. The world and all its pursuits, and it's a slow death that few even realize they're being harmed by it until it's too late. It's a deceptive death that few even realize when they actually open the door, and to the extent of which they had fallen into it. And so I'm describing some things, and hopefully I've got your attention here, because we have to be on guard. This is an age where we have to especially be on guard. And I will say, this past winter, I kind of fell into a lull. And so I need this message. I need a message today. If you don't need the message, then you can switch it off if you like. But I need it. And it's a message actually I wrote a number of years ago. And it caused me to take action when I realized what I was involved in. And so let's take a look at what the scriptures have to say about the world, who it belongs to, what's happened to it, and what we're supposed to be doing as believers in Yahweh. Yahweh says in Psalm 50 verse 12, "If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world is mine and all its fullness." So this world belongs to Yahweh. Now, if you turn on the news, you read your typical media outlets or whatever, everyone acts like the world belongs to them. And most people in this world act as though it belongs to them, but the truth is it belongs to Yahweh. Now, Yahweh did give it to us as a place of our dominion. But ultimately, Yahweh is the owner and creator. And he expects us to be good stewards and to rule all things that we are given dominion over with his wisdom and with his rules and according to his ways. Now, what's going to happen to the world? Because it's not following the ways of Yahweh. It's not doing according to the way that Yahweh ordained this world to be. Yahweh says in Psalm 9 verse 8, he says, "He shall judge the world in righteousness. He shall administer judgment for the peoples in uprightness." And so he's going to judge this world. He says in Isaiah 13:11, "I will punish the world for its evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. I will halt the arrogance of the proud, and will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible." John 16 verse 7, Yahshua said, "Nevertheless I tell you the truth, it is to your advantage that I go away. For if I do not go away, the Helper will not come to you. But if I depart, I will send him to you. And when he has come, he will convict the world of sin, and of righteousness, and of judgment." Of sin, because they do not believe in me. Of righteousness, because I go to my Father and you see me no more. Of judgment, because the ruler of this world is judged. And so the whole world will be judged, including its residing prince. So Yahweh, He placed man in the Garden of Eden to take dominion over the earth. And He filled him with His Spirit. It says He breathed into Adam His Spirit, and he became a living soul. And He wanted Adam to walk in His image, but He gave him a choice. And Adam chose a different prince, a different king. And Adam's descendants since that time mostly have chosen a different king to walk in the spirit of Yahweh's enemy. So Yahweh did not appoint Satan to be the ruler of this world. He's only the prince because man chose him to be their ruler. Now most of them don't even realize that they are. But they are. They're walking in His spirit, in His doctrine, and His theology, His self-centered theology. And so man has chosen a liar to be their prince. It used to be that Satan would set up these different idols and gain the adoration and worship of men through that method. But today, people are acting like the devil himself, and themselves, placing themselves on the throne, just as the devil placed himself on the throne. And when they place themselves on the throne, they're acting exactly like he did and walking in his spirit. And so it's even maybe a more dangerous condition, this humanistic secularism going down the pike today. Most people don't bow down before Baal gods and Dagon idols and different things. Instead, they rule as their own prince. And so they walk in exact spirit that Satan walked in, and wanting to be like the Most High. And so man, though, by doing that, has chosen a liar to be their prince. The father of lies, according to John 8:44. Yahshua is speaking to those who are of the world, and he says to them this. He says, "You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar and the father of it. But because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me." That's exactly how it is. Sometimes when we tell people the truth, they don't believe us, because they're not used to hearing truth. They're used to hearing lies. They're not accustomed to hearing the Spirit of Yahweh. They're accustomed to hearing the spirit of their father, the devil. Yahshua called them the devil's offspring, because they were following after lies and the father of lies, and they were walking in lies. And so we have to be careful when we hear something and that we take something into our heart. And we have to ask ourselves something. Whose children are we? And whose children is that Spirit inspiring people to become? Yahweh the Father, is He our King? Or are we our King? Are we our own King, walking in the spirit of the enemy? Who is on the throne? The image of Elohim that we were created to be in, or the image of his enemy? It's our choice. And most people will not choose to put Yahweh on the throne. Most will not choose to walk in the image of Elohim. Well, how do you tell the difference? 1 John chapter 3 and verse 10. It says, "In this the children of Elohim and the children of the devil are manifest. Whoever does not practice righteousness is not of Elohim, nor is he who does not love his brother. Now we want to be his children. And so we have to practice righteousness. That is a telltale sign. And we have to love one another. The devil's children of hate will embrace lies. Yahweh's children will hate lies and will love the truth. Those who love lies, of course, they're going to follow the father of lies. And there's coming, brothers, a lawless one. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 9. The coming of the lawless one is according to the working of Satan, with all power, signs, and lying wonders, and with all unrighteous deception among those who perish, because they did not receive the love of the truth, that they might be saved. So we have to have a love for truth, or we may find ourselves following the father of lies. And for this reason, Elohim will send them strong delusion that they should believe the lie, that they all may be condemned who did not believe the truth, but had pleasure in unrighteousness. There's the lies versus truth, the unrighteousness versus righteousness. And so it's very important, brothers, that we have a love for the truth and that we love righteousness. Otherwise, Yahweh can send a strong delusion so that you'll think you're following the truth, but you're actually following lies. It's the prince of this world who is a liar and a deceiver. And Scripture teaches us in Revelation 12, verse 9, that he deceives the whole world. It says the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast out. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast with him. So the one who deceives the whole world, according to Revelation 12, has the whole world following after him. And it's that same leader who's going to lead this world into the outright worship of him in the ages to come, maybe in the next 30 years or so, maybe less. Never know. We know this. This is not a time to be caught up in the spirit of the world, because that is a deceptive spirit. We have to be very, very careful that we are not getting caught up in any of his lies. Now, are we on guard against that? Are we ready not only to be on guard against that, but also to judge that? 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 2 says, "Do you not know the saints will judge the world? And if the world will be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters?" So if we're one day going to judge this world and the residing spirit of this world, we definitely don't want to be a part of its evil. We're the ones judging its evil. And our attitude needs to be a willingness to keep ourselves clean from the defilement of its leaven. Scripture talks about in James 1:27, "Pure and undefiled religion before Elohim and the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their trouble, to keep oneself unspotted from the world." Unspotted meaning unstained. See, the world really does want to place its yucky, disgusting, filthy stains on you. You know, I've felt the stain before. You ever felt that stain? That I remember about, I don't know how long ago, how many years ago it was, back in the 90s. No, this was around 2002 or so, somewhere around there. Anyway, it was somewhere at that time, and after a beautiful, wonderful Shabbat meeting, I went to go visit a person's house, and we were rejoicing in the Shabbat. And I walk in the home, just me and the family just glowing, and we would go into that house as a relative, and that TV was going and just pouring out its worldly filth, its spirit into the room, and the people weren't believers, and I don't know how else you would describe it, but when I left, I felt like I had just this yuckiness inside, this kind of this clingy, yucky inside my spirit. A few years after that, I went and visited that same relative, and there was a football game on the TV. And, I might say there's nothing wrong with watching two teams throw a ball around, but it's so violent. And then they got all this worldly garbage accompanying it. And I spent the night there, and I was ready to have our daily devotions with my family, and just before that time I'm ready to do this comes on the TV, and I sit there about 10 or 15 minutes trying to talk to this relative, and all of a sudden I felt like I didn't really feel like reading the scriptures. I didn't really feel like taking the time and sitting down with my family and praising Yahweh and opening the Bible and going over it together with them. It was like the feeling and desire to do that was sucked out of me just after 10-15 minutes of watching it. And so there's something about it. I forced myself, and I did it anyway, but I took note. They had rock and roll introductions and different things. It was, to me, very, very worldly. And so different things were happening, and I realized that people are getting this all the time who watch TV. I did a lot of I did a lot of studying on this TV thing, and I believe it was 98 that I finally did away with watching. We unplugged the TV from our antenna, and we just didn't watch it after that because of what I saw it doing to my family. And so what we began to do when we were visiting this relative's house, and it was to pray before we entered in that the Spirit of Yahweh dwelling in us would impact them rather than letting the spirit of Yahweh's enemy impact us. And when we began to do that, it was a little bit better. But then I realized it's not a place for us to spend the Shabbat. So, but brothers, we have this spirit of Hollywood constantly promoting its satanic theology, and it's fighting against what we're trying to do. And when I saw that, actually I picked up the TV and I started to throw it off the porch, and my wife stopped me and says, we do have home videos and stuff. I would hate to not watch those. So I brought it back, but we never had it hooked up after that. And we haven't since. But I'm starting to notice now that the internet is becoming more and more like the television. And so it's a little better in that you can really, if you want to stay on a biblical site that, like this one that is trying to glorify Yahweh, that's good. But there's a whole lot of other places on the internet that teach you and influence you about the ways of Satan and the ways of the world and so on. And so we have to allow Yahweh's Spirit in us to make the impact on others and not let the spirit of the world impact us. And so, if there's something contrary, something in our house which is contrary and is harming our families, then we need to do something about it. And that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to go completely out of the world. You know, people would say, well, EliYah, man, you live way out in the sticks. There's one town in your whole county and one traffic light in the whole county and one high school, and that's it. And that's true. But we also minister outwardly. We have an outreach, and we go on ministry trips, and so I try to, be careful about that. I don't want to live like a hermit, and I want to fulfill the Great Commission. Paul said, I wrote to you in my epistle, 1 Corinthians 5:9, not to keep company with sexually immoral people. Yet I certainly did not mean with the sexually immoral people of this world, or with the covetous, or extortioners, or idolaters, since then you would need to go out of the world. But now I have written to you not to keep company with anyone named a brother who is sexually immoral, or covetous, or an idolater, or a reviler, or a drunkard, or extortioner, not even to eat with such a person. And so we ought to expect, brothers, that when we're out in the world, you're going to find the world and worldly people. And so we can, have our guard up. But Yahweh forbid this worldly thing be in the brethren. Although too often that is the case. And so we have to be more careful about the spirit of the world being in the brethren than the spirit of the world being in the world. We know that's where it's going to be. Now we don't have to completely escape and live in a cave somewhere, but we need to be on guard against letting the spirit of the world have its power and influence over us. And so, we can, wherever we go, we can bind up the power of the enemy and to where it cannot harm us or influence us in any way. And I do that a lot. But it all starts with having a strong dislike, a hatred for sin, and therefore a strong dislike for the things of this world that are leading men to sin. But we, brothers, because the Spirit of Yahweh is in us, we can overcome the things of the world. 1 John chapter 5, verse 4. For whatever is born of Elohim overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, our faith. And so we can overcome. We can live in the world, but not be of the world. So, but what about scriptures that say, didn't Elohim so love the world? John 3:16, for Elohim so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Yes, he did and does love the world, inasmuch as he desires to see them redeemed from the spiritually wrong things. But he doesn't love the things that people do that are against him, obviously. And that needs to be our attitude also. For Elohim did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. He who believes in him is not condemned, but he who does not believe is condemned already, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of Elohim. And this is the condemnation, that the light is come into the world, and men loved darkness rather than light, because their deeds were evil. For everyone practicing evil hates the light, and does not come to the light, lest his deeds should be exposed. But he who does the truth comes to the light, that his deeds may be clearly seen, that they have been done in Elohim. And so we don't love the world in the sense that we long to do the things that they do. But we do love the world in the sense that we desire that they would repent and receive Yahshua, that they might have salvation. Now, if we didn't love them, we wouldn't even want them to repent. We would hope that they burn in the lake of fire forever. But no, we want them to repent. We want them to turn to the ways of Yahweh's Spirit and be cleansed of the unclean spirits. We know that most people won't. I mean, when in history has the majority ever followed Yahweh? It's just not reality. But, and we know that most people are going to follow the prince of this world, but that doesn't mean that we just give up. I'm glad Yahweh didn't give up on me. How about you? So all the world is going to follow after this spirit that is not from Yahweh. And in Revelation 13:3 says, I saw one of his heads as if it had been mortally wounded. His deadly wound was healed, and all the world marveled and followed the beast. And so we got to be careful. If we're following, always following the things of this world, when the world begins to just outright worship the beast, what's going to happen? We're going to be so sorely tempted, aren't we? And they've got their ideas, their peace plans, their plans for world peace, the ways they're going to unify all the UNs and the European Unions and the Middle East peace plans and all these things, trying to unite everybody. But there is no peace. There is no peace. In fact, 1 Thessalonians 5:3 says, when they say peace and safety, then sudden destruction comes upon them, as labor pains upon a pregnant woman, and they shall not escape. So we have to be very careful that we're not being influenced by the spirit of the world. We need to stand ready to fight against this spirit and be sober spiritually. Be vigilant and be aware of the deception and the lies that come through the deceivableness of unrighteousness. Now, there are a lot of scriptures that talk about the need to be sober. You know, in light of the times coming, soberness needs to be something we practice. Too many times people get, this eat, drink, and be merry, consume and enjoy mindset. And we have to be on guard against that kind of deception. So, because if we are not on guard, if we're not watching, then Yahshua will come in an hour that we don't expect. Now the reality is, as Scripture says, there is no peace for the wicked. Only through Yahshua the Messiah do we have peace. Because it's not until we have peace with Yahweh that we have peace at all. And Yahshua said to his disciples, peace I leave with you, John 14:27. My peace I give to you. Not as the world gives do I give it to you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. So how can we know if we're following after the ways of the world? How can we know if we are being caught in this spirit of the world? Maybe we keep certain commandments that the world does not keep. We take confidence in that. Maybe we don't participate in some of the things the world chooses to participate in. And we take confidence in that we're not being influenced. But are there ways in which we are receiving their spirit? Observe the things that the world does. Examine your own walk. Are we doing just as they do? Do we act the way they do? Do we look the way they do? Do we think the way they do? It's so easy to go along with the other sheep. There are thousands and thousands of sheep all headed in one direction. And we're going against that direction, saying, pardon me, I'm going a different direction. We've got to be of another sheepfold completely, actually. We got to turn the other direction and follow the Master's voice. Listen to his spirit, not the spirit of the world. It's so easy for carnal man to turn away and follow the other sheep. But we need to hear the voice of the one shepherd and learn to recognize that voice. And the way we recognize the spirit of the world, brothers, this is it. Spend a lot of time listening to the shepherd's voice. And when the voice of a stranger speaks, you will recognize it. But if the things are always so muddied and muddy between the voices of this world, the spirit of this world, the words of this world, and we spend little time with our minds reading the scriptures and hearing the words of life, then we may not recognize the voice of the stranger. It's so easy for carnal man to turn away from his carnal ways. Not so easy, I'm sorry. And much of the things of this world is very appealing to the flesh. And we're in a rich society. And we like the creature comforts. Our flesh is used to being pampered. And in the background, you got this father of lies always wanting to feed you with a bunch of garbage. And so we are at an age where we can't be like Laodicea and be lukewarm. We got to be on fire. We got to be hot for the things of Yahweh. So that even if we're in the midst of our enemies, we know his voice. Now there are some who say, we got to look a little bit like the world, and act like him in order to win them. You got Christian versions of most everything. Christian tattoo parlors even now, and Christian magicians, and Christian rock music, and Christian this and Christian that. We don't win the world by imitating the world. You win the world by imitating Yeshua the Messiah. So who are we emulating? Who are we following? Who are we imitating? Are we imitating Yeshua the Messiah? Or are we imitating the father of lies through following the spirit of this world? What are we doing with our time? That's an important question for all of us. If there's ever any question as to whether something's worth your time, ask yourself, is this benefiting me spiritually? Can I picture Yeshua the Messiah doing this with me and enjoying it? We often know the true character and values of a person by just observing how their time's spent. And so how much do we value the things of Yahweh's Spirit, the things of Him? Where is our time spent? That will answer your question. How much time do we spend on worldly entertainments, things of this age that are temporal, as opposed to things of the Spirit? What would Yeshua be doing in this age today? The world seeks their amusements. It seems that with the world, everything has got to be amusing. Always looking for something to be amused by. You know what the word amuse means? To muse means to think. A is a negative particle. In other words, no thinking. I've heard it said America is going to the lake of fire, and they're laughing all the way. There's so many things to waste our time and to create distractions from what's really important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against having any form of entertainment, anything to relax and rest, and I'm not against that. I'm saying we have to be aware of getting caught up in it. It's like spiritual junk food or something. You got to be careful. And a lot of times, people will read more about movie stars, sports team and players, and musicians and politicians than they will read about Yahweh. And that, brothers, is what has convicted me. there's a danger in following the latest thing that so-and-so is doing, or some team is doing, or some other thing is doing, whatever someone else is doing, except for what Yahshua is wanting to do in our life. And that's where something's not right. Scriptures collect dust, while most people's lives spiritually rot away in their easy chair. And the things of the Spirit are secondary to their minds, chasing after the dollar, or whatever work they choose to get involved in, whatever entertainment in the in-between hours. Anything to occupy our mind except the spiritual things. Oh yes, they'll put their spiritual hat on for a while and do the things of the Spirit. And when the time's over, they get their worldly hat back on and do the things they were doing before. And something is not right. Something is not right about that. James says, adulterers and adulteresses, do you not know that friendship with the world is enmity, that's hatred, with Elohim? Whoever therefore wants to be a friend of the world makes himself an enemy of Elohim. Or do you think that the Scripture says in vain, the Spirit who dwells in us yearns jealously? There's a jealous spirit in us. The Spirit of Yahweh is a jealous spirit. What is the Spirit of Yahweh doing when we are not focused on Him? We're not focused on the things of Yahweh. What is that Spirit doing? It's yearning jealously. So Yahweh is a jealous Elohim. And things that try to occupy His position are things that we need to avoid. If anything is occupying His position, whether it's the attention that we're giving or the adoration that we're giving or whatever it is, Yahweh is a jealous Elohim. And we cannot let the things of this world and the spirit of this world drag us in to its cares. Yahweh is jealous. So what's he continue to say here? But he gives more grace. Therefore he says, Elohim resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore submit to Elohim. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Draw near to Elohim, and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your hearts, you double-minded. So there's a double mind. There's the worldly hat and the spiritual hat. Lament and mourn and weep. Let your laughter be turned to mourning, and your joy to gloom. Humble yourselves in the sight of the Master, and he will lift you up. If we have been adulterers and adulteresses, seeking friendship with the world, we're making ourselves an enemy of Yahweh. And we're committing adultery against Yahweh. See, the world has a lot of things to take our eyes off of Him. Probably more so now than at any time in the history of the universe. There's so many ways, so many choices, so many things that people can get caught up in. Internet, movies, TV, sports, news. The list goes on, and there's always new news. Always. They never say, well, there's no news today. They'll invent news. So there's always something going on. And so my question is, for myself and for all of us as we draw near this Passover, what are we spending our time doing? What are we focused on? Whatever it is, that's what you love. Most of the time. Now, sometimes you have to work. You may not like the work, but you have to. But in the in-between times, what are we doing? Hollywood is dangerous. You know what a magician's wand is made out of? Hollywood. I'm not joking. That's what a magician's wand is made out of. And it's so ironic that, and maybe just not so coincidental, that people receive that spirit of Hollywood that comes through channeling, where they sit spellbound for hours as Hollywood waves its magic garbage and promotes demonic theology. You know, the same unclean spirit, brothers, is going to follow the beast faithfully. Through the prince and power of the airwaves, many will be deceived. And few things have contributed to the corrupt society that we live in more than the spirit of Hollywood. You know, it used to be you had to go to some dark corner of town to see total corruption, moral depravity, and wickedness. But now, it's piped into millions of homes every day on a regular basis through internet, television, and it's all done in a ha-ha, very funny, entertaining way, so that you can be corrupt like they are. Even Fox News. Fox News is one of the conservative networks, right? I see what they're up to. Every time I go to their website, just below the headlines and just before the section that give you the details, other news and so on, they have something, there'll be at least one picture or one story related to the lust of the eye. Every single time you go there. I've not found one time it wasn't there. Maybe there's some exceptions. I don't go there very often. But when I saw that, I knew something was demonic about it. Or they'll have some story about Hollywood this or Hollywood that, some kind of story, to try to get people to lust. And something morally repugnant. And so what I do, brothers, when I want to see the headlines, I pick another news site that doesn't have that garbage. And one of my favorite is there's a breaking news Twitter feed. Just gives you the headlines only. Or on a Mozilla Firefox web browser, you can get latest headlines, and then you just have to read the headlines. Now, I have been to other sites, MSNBC and others. For some reason, they don't have the amount of garbage that Fox News has, and Fox News is supposed to be the conservative place. So, you just have to be careful. So, and don't read it. You don't have to read about the latest murder, the latest rape, the latest disgusting act by some whoever, wherever. We don't have to know those kind of things. So we want to focus on the things that are good, the things that are lovely, the things that are pure, the things that are of good report, that are praiseworthy. That's what we want to focus on. Because the world wants to get us to love the things it loves. The vile. That's what it loves. So it's written in 1 John 2:15, "Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, is not of the Father, but is of the world. And the world is passing away, and the lust of it, but he who does the will of Elohim abides forever." See, the things of this world, they are all temporary. What we want to focus on is doing the will of Elohim, seeking the things that are eternal. We want to abide forever. Well, he who does the will of Elohim will abide forever. You know, Lot was tormented. He was vexed, it says, with the wickedness that was around him. In the same way, the very sight of these worldly things should torment and vex our souls. We don't want to allow these things to be a part of our walk. But the Spirit of Yahweh has a way of leading us to the state to where we see the spirit of the world and we cringe. And that's where we want to be. Because the world's spirit has a way of grabbing a person who doesn't have his guard up. So we have to be careful. Now, Yahweh said, "Now I will rise," Isaiah 33:10 says Yahweh. "Now I will be exalted. Now I will lift myself up. You shall conceive chaff. You shall bring forth stubble. Your breath as fire shall devour you. And the people shall be like the burnings of lime, like thorns cut up. They shall be burned in the fire. Hear, you who are afar off, what I have done, and you who are near, acknowledge my might. The sinners in Sion are afraid. Fearfulness has seized the hypocrites. Who among us shall dwell with the devouring fire? Who among us shall dwell with everlasting burnings? He who walks righteously and speaks uprightly. He who despises the gain of oppressions, who gestures with his hands, refusing bribes, who stops his ears from hearing of bloodshed, and shuts his eyes from seeing evil. He will dwell on high. His place of defense shall be the fortress of rocks. Bread will be given to him. His water will be sure. See, the world wants to tell you all its gory, gruesome details of murders and crimes, and we have to shut our eyes to these things. We know there's murderers out there. We don't need to hear about it. We don't need to hear every gory detail of it. We want to dwell with Yahweh. We want to stop our ears from hearing that stuff. Shut our eyes from seeing that stuff. We want to dwell with Yahweh, who is a consuming fire, because you see, the fire that consumes the enemy will only refine the righteous. And we can dwell with him. He is a consuming fire. Now, we don't want to be ignorant of the enemy's devices, but when it comes to malice and evil, we want to be like little children. 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 20, "Brethren, do not be children in understanding, however, in malice be babes, but in understanding be mature." And so, when it comes to evil that's in the world, we don't have to read all about it to recognize it. We don't have to find out, what's this evil about, in order for us to recognize that's not right. The truth is, brothers, we should be in tune with the Spirit of Yahweh and in the things of Yahweh to the extent that when the evil presents itself, we discern the evil. We discern it. We don't have to be picking from the tree of knowledge and good and evil to know to avoid the evil. We just need to be in tune with the Spirit of holiness and purity and truth, and when ugliness comes our way, we'll know that's not from him. That's not from Yahweh. You know, some years ago, Yahweh showed me that time spent not doing his work, the work of Yahweh, not doing things to build up the kingdom and not seeking his ways and doing the things of him, it's all really wasted time. And we're called to redeem the time. Whereas those other things yields no fruit, heaps up no rewards, gives us no treasures in the age to come, and too often corrupts our minds. You know, we live in such an awesome time in history. Never before have the scriptures been so readily available. As Daniel wrote, that knowledge will increase. Here we are. They call it the information age. And we can use this time that we have now, this blessing we've been given, to seek out the ways of Yahweh. We can seek out the scriptures like never before in the history of mankind. It is an incredible time that we live in. And in the country that we live in. You know, we have the freedom to worship our Father as we choose. And proclaim this good news of Yahweh to the whole every nation. Are we squandering this opportunity and wasting it? We need to work while it's day. The night's coming, Yahshua said, when no man can work. So while it is day, and I need to work on this myself, are we wasting any time? Are we wasting any time? That is an important question. What are we doing with our time? We need to seek the kingdom and his righteousness. We don't have to worry about, if you're spending a lot of time at work, there's no end. I mean, if you're trying to raise your standard of living, there's no end to it. There's never this top where it says, okay, it's enough. Because the eyes of man are never satisfied. So we have to be careful. Are we swallowing this eat, drink, and be merry mindset that the spirit of the world is trying to get people to do? We got to be careful. For the grace of Elohim, Titus 2:11, that brings salvation has appeared to all men, teaching us that denying unrighteousness and worldly lusts, we should live soberly, righteously, reverently in the present age, looking for the blessed hope and glorious appearing of our great Elohim and Savior Yahshua the Messiah, who gave himself for us, that he might redeem us from every lawless deed and purify for himself his own special people zealous for good works. Speak these things, exhort and rebuke with all authority. Let no one despise you. So we need to be looking for that blessed hope. We need to be zealous for good works, as it says. We should live soberly, righteously, reverently. If you take a close look at it, though, the spirit of this world has a way of killing the zeal, setting aside the hope, and marginalizing our reverence toward Yahweh. And anything that marginalizes him is an enemy of him. If we're redeemed, we're going to be different. We're going to be peculiar. We're not going to be like the world. We're not going to enjoy its customs of vanity, nor the revelry with them, because the Spirit in us will groan at the vanity of it all, knowing it's this very thing that keeps men from hearing Yahweh's Spirit and turning to him. We need to be zealous for good works, rather than the works that do not profit. Let's not justify things. If we're seeking to join the world and the worldly things to win the world, you don't do it that way. Why don't we set the standard high? Rather than trying to bring people to the example of Yahshua by watering down what you do, Why don't we let the Torah of Yahweh be lifted up as a standard for all men to live by, and live the high standard? Not just talk about it, live it. And let all men be drawn to the Messiah's light through that. Not a watered-down faith, not a worldly faith, but a pure faith. Living soberly in the present age, having a clear mind. Yahshua gave a parable in Matthew 24:48. But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delaying his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and at an hour he is not aware of, and will cut him in two, and appoint him his portion with the hypocrites. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. You know, I've come across a lot of people involved in this kind of thing, and I do mean literally drinking every night. But there's also a spiritual drunkenness. If you look in Revelation, spiritual drunkenness has to do with false doctrines. And drunkenness spiritually are those, from my mind, is just people coming up with Bible theories to answer silly questions that no one can prove one way or the other. And then partaking in it, they beat people over the head with their falsehoods. You know, times of prosperity can be times of spiritual drunkenness. And we dig into all kinds of strange and false doctrines that do not have their foundation in the Word. Just theories. And so we have to be aware of this time of prosperity and fullness of bread, that idleness can breed spiritual drunkenness. Some people are bored with the Scriptures. They're bored with seeking righteousness, and so the focus is looking for the secret knowledge, like Gnostics. You might call them surmisings. I think Scripture calls them evil surmising. They have no basic biblical basis, just ideas and theories, which have no proof. And if that's a person's focus, you know, we're not building a foundation that's strong enough to carry us in the age to come. So we got to be careful. Stick to the basics, build on that foundation, and we don't have to go beyond what's written. We don't. Remember Ezekiel talks about Sodom. What was her sin? Ezekiel 16:49. Look, this was the iniquity of your sister Sodom. She and her daughter had pride, fullness of food, and abundance of idleness. Neither did she strengthen the hand of the poor and the needy. Very interesting. Because we kind of live in that kind of land today. Lots of pride, plenty of food around, and plenty of idleness. We live in Sodom, my brothers. We are living in Sodom and Gomorrah. And the homosexuality that came out of it, that's what came out of Sodom too. But the root problem was pride, fullness of bread, and idleness. So what about us in our own personal life? Do we have pride, idleness, and fullness of bread? It's a dangerous combination. You know, I like what David said regarding things that are, fancy doctrines and so on. He wrote a whole psalm on it, actually. Psalm 131. He said, Yahweh, my heart is not haughty, nor my eyes lofty, neither do I concern myself with great matters, nor with things too profound for me. Surely I have calmed and quieted my soul, like a weaned child with his mother. Like a weaned child is my soul within me. O Yisrael, hope in Yahweh from this time forth and forever. This psalm is very beautiful to me. Just a peaceful, quieted soul, not focused on the things that are too profound. And I just think it's beautiful. Idleness and fullness of bread are pretty accurate descriptions of the age we live in, though, doesn't it? And that's what leads us to spiritual drunkenness, and the creature comforts leading us into pleasing the flesh, getting us in that habit of pleasing the flesh all the time. And so why don't we just establish our faith on what we know to be the undeniable Word of Yahweh, and let the Word of Yahweh bring us to refinement. When we read the Scriptures, are we just reading a bunch of stories? Or are we getting fed? An unbeliever can read the Bible and maybe never get anything out of it. But if we're reading the Scriptures with the mindset of, what do I have to change about me? What do I need to change in my life? Then, when you read the Scriptures, it'll be like food. And it'll produce fruit in you. And it'll produce faith in you, as it says. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of Elohim. Romans 10:17. The word of Yahweh gives us the hearing gives us the faith. And so many brothers are defeated and lacking that faith, losing their first love. Yahshua, the Word made flesh. How much time do we spend in the Word made flesh? Some people say, I just wish I had more time. You know what I don't have time really means? And I have to be honest with myself. I don't have time simply means it's not a priority. We all have 24 hours in a day, right? So for us to say I don't have time is to say that's not my priority right now. Because we all have the same amount of time. And our time is basically our life. And what we do with our time determines where Yahweh really stands. And so let's not fail to immerse ourselves in the Word of Yahweh and be careful about the unclean spirit of this world. Beloved, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits, whether they are of Elohim, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. By this you know the spirit of Elohim. Every spirit that confesses Yahshua the Messiah has come in the flesh is of Elohim. And every spirit that does not confess Yahshua Messiah has come in the flesh is not of Elohim. And this is the spirit of the anti-Messiah, which you have heard was coming, and is now already in the world. There are a lot of sheep being carried off by grievous wolves. Anti-New Testament, anti-Yahshua doctrines and teachers of foolishness. We need to receive the whole word, the full counsel of Yahweh, not put the New Testament on a secondary position. It's all the word of Yahweh. And we have to make sure that we are building on the foundation of the word, because if we don't have that for our foundation, brothers, if we're doubting the words of Yahweh, then we don't really have anything to stand on. There's no, like the rock being pulled out from underneath of us. So we need to pray that we are strong and seek out the importance of the Scriptures. And the more we read it, the more faith we're given, and the more we realize how awesome it is. So we have to be careful about that. There's a way that seems right to a man. There's no end to those ways, but the end thereof is the way of death. Let's overcome and build off a sure foundation. You are of Elohim, little children, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. You ever notice something? It says, they are the world, therefore they speak of the world as the world hears them. You know, notice something? A lot of times in times of prosperity, like we're in now, let's be honest, problems in relationships tend to rise up. And there's strife among brethren and strife in the home. And, if we were all in a time of tribulation, we wouldn't get so offended at the petty little things so easily. If we're already suffering over major things, the tiny little sufferings we have to bear for one another are no problem. Having a common united enemy has a way of uniting people against his cause. Having that visible enemy has a way of uniting brothers together. Even the most divided nation a lot of times will unite together if they feel that their sovereignty is being threatened. We have to realize, though, brothers, we have an enemy right now. There's a battle going on. There's no neutral side. You're on one or the other. You've chosen a side, whether you think you're on one or the other or not. And this battle is for the souls of men. For our soul and for the soul of our brothers. And we need to stand together and fight together against this common enemy. And when we start doing that, all the petty little fightings and strife won't be there. And so, brethren, hear the parable of the sower. Matthew 13:22. Now he who receives seed among thorns is he who hears the word, and the cares of this world and the deceitfulness of riches choke the word, and he becomes unfruitful. This is such a perfect description. Yahshua could not have put it a better way. At first, there's plenty of light getting to the plant. Then there's these thorns. The cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, choking the word, and becomes unfruitful. That's what the world does. The thorns grow bigger and bigger until it can't receive the light it needs to grow. The plant doesn't completely necessarily die. It just doesn't bear any fruit. You may be a living plant, but you might not be bearing any fruit. And you may think that the fact that you're a living plant is enough. But Yahshua wants us to bear fruit. Don't let the seed fall among the thorns. The thorns will grow around a person daily, little by little, growing and growing, until there's no room for anything left. That's the world. That's how it is. We need to let the seed fall on the good soil. He who receives seed on good ground is the one who hears the word, understands it, bears fruit, bringing forth some 100, some 60, some 30. That's where we need to be. It's better if a person had never learned the way of righteousness than to have learned it and to turn right back to the vomit he was involved in before. 2 Peter chapter 2, verse 20. For if after they have escaped the pollutions of the world, through the knowledge of the Master and Savior Yahshua the Messiah, they are again entangled in them and overcome, the latter end is worse for them than the beginning. For It would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than having known it, to turn from the holy commandment delivered to them. But it has happened to them according to the true proverb, a dog returns to his own vomit, and a sow, having washed, to her wallowing in the mire. Brethren, we don't want to be dogs. Dogs are not going to make it. Dogs are outside the kingdom. We got to beware of dogs. I don't mean physical dogs. I mean spiritual dogs. Let's be Israelites, not heathen dogs. Let's be sure that we've removed the world from our lives. Let's despise the things, the worldly things. Not despise people who are caught up in it, but despise the things they're caught up in. To the extent that we despise that also in us. We'll never really overcome the worldliness and the sin until we hate it. Until we have a true, genuine hate for it. And we have to have the mind of Yahweh to have that kind of hatred for sin. And so the word sown in us, brothers, will overcome the world. It will bear fruit and draw others away from the world by the light of the Messiah living in us. But there needs to be a difference. There needs to be brothers and sisters who are willing to be different. I don't mean just different with the name and the Sabbath and feasts and so on. I mean other things, daily things. Not wasting excessive time in worldly things, but are working towards spiritual things. Spiritually minded people, a humble people, loving people who are not focused on the flesh. People who think different, behave different, look different. But how can we change the world if the world's already changed us? How can we turn the world upside down if we're being turned upside down by the world? And so let's purify ourselves, cast away the wicked influences, and do whatever it takes within the will of Yahweh to get rid of the worldly influences. Influence and the power of influence is probably no greater thing that keeps man from letting Yahweh be his king. Like ancient Israel, what did Yahweh say about the ones who were around them? They'll be like thorns and snares to you because of their influence, because of the spirit of the world that's in them. Well, we live in Babylon, brothers. We've got to be on guard. Yahweh told him, don't make agreements with them. They'll be like thorns and go. They'll seduce you to turn away from me. Power of influence. We are called to be a peculiar people, a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, his own special people, that you may proclaim the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. 1 Peter 2:9. And brothers, we're called to be different, even at the risk of being hated, rejected, and killed. John 15:18, if the world hates you, you know it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, I chose you out of the world. Therefore the world hates you. Remember the word I said to you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But all these things they will do to you for my name's sake, because they do not know him who sent me. And so, brothers, don't be surprised when, I didn't say if, I said when, the world rejects you. And don't be surprised at the fiery trial which is to try you, because the servant's not greater than his master. And don't be surprised if we receive those kinds of persecutions. And don't let that drag you back into it. We need to have our hand to the plow and not look back. Luke 9:62, but Yahushua said to him, no one having put his hand to the plow and looking back is fit for the kingdom of Elohim. Remember Lot's wife? Brothers, there's no turning back. Don't look back to Egypt. Look forward to the promised land. Let's move on in his spirit. Set our affections on things which are above, not the things that are in this world. If then you are raised with Messiah, seek those things which are above, Colossians 3. Where Messiah is, sitting at the right hand of Elohim. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. For you died. You died. And your life is hidden with Messiah in Elohim. When Messiah, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. Therefore put to death your members which are on the earth, fornication, uncleanness, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. Because of these things the wrath of Elohim is coming upon the sons of disobedience, in which you yourselves once walked when you lived in them. But now you yourselves are to put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy language out of your mouth. Do not lie to one another, since you have put off the old man with his deeds, and have put on the new man, who is renewed in knowledge according to the image of him who created him. If you don't understand that, putting off the old man, putting on the new man, please go to the transcripts page and watch the video, The Dying of Yahushua in Us. See, we're not the old person anymore. We've got to let go. We are a new creation. We've taken on a new identity, a new outlook, a new life, a new perspective, a new family, a new way of thinking, a new way of reacting to the things of the world. We now identify ourselves with Yahushua the Master, our Redeemer. He is our life. Our life is hidden in his life, and he is the one dwelling in us, not ourselves. It's not we who live. And so if he is in us, he will overcome the world through us. You are of Elohim, little children, 1 John 4:4, and have overcome them, because he who is in you is greater than he who is in the world. And so we don't have to be afraid of the enemy, because we know who's in us, and we know who's greater. And so let's put things in perspective. Romans 12:1, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of Elohim, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to Elohim, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of Elohim. If you have to, throw that television in the garbage, please. Because though nobody goes with us, and many people around us seek to walk corruptly, we can't let that corrupt us. If it's corrupting you, get rid of it. Our love and devotion has to be set toward Yahweh, who is greater than anything that TV wants to teach you. It's programming. It is programming, by the way. That's why they call it programming. Because it programs people with the spirit of the world. But it's only when our minds are renewed that the transformation from the kingdom of darkness to the kingdom of light can actually take place. We need to have that renewed mind, not one that's constantly being assaulted, constantly being attacked, constantly being persuaded to be in conformity to the world. We need to have the renewed mind that's constantly being fed with the good bread, that we may prove what is the good and acceptable will of Yahweh. If we want to have righteous discernment when we read the Scriptures, we've got to have that mind that's not conformed to the world, a mind that's renewed. And so let's allow our minds to be sown with good, pure, praiseworthy things. There are lots of competing spirits, lots of words, lots of images that are wicked and that are not according to Yahweh. David said, I will set nothing wicked before my eyes. Psalm 101 verse 3. I hate the work of those who fall away. It shall not cling to me. See, he knew. That's what it does. This man after Yahweh's own heart knew. He didn't want to set that wicked garbage in front of his eyes. And there's no greater way, brothers, that comes through today than TV and internet. That's what it does. It places a stain. It cleaves to you. When you set those things before your eyes, they cling to you. Yahweh has to wash you off. So the best thing to do is not set them there. Set that which is holy and just and pure and good before your eyes, and let that cling to you, so that we have the right spirit feeding us and dwelling in us, and not allowing the spirit of the world to affect our minds. Let's seek Yahweh's Spirit, the Spirit that gives life, for the flesh profits nothing. The words Yahshua has spoken are spirit, and they are life. John 6:63. That's the spirit that we have received, not the spirit of the world. 1 Corinthians 2:12. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from Elohim, that we might know the things that have been freely given to us by Elohim. We have not received that spirit of the world. And so when that spirit of the world comes to you, do not receive it. Do not. That goes for everybody, including me. Preaching to myself too. And so, brothers, we see the right thing to do. But I know these words in the Scriptures convicted me first. And so I'm hoping it will convict you too. I turned the television off. I did a lot of things. And now, internet use, I'm finding more and more to be a real problem. And so we've got to figure out a way, and not allow the websites and the garbage of the world to have an impact on us. And so we know what's right. And so when we come across something that's contrary to Him, take no interest in it. Don't take any interest in it at all. Do whatever you got to do. If you got to put a filter on, if you got to limit your use or whatever you have to do, get rid of it. If it's fighting against the Spirit of Yahweh dwelling in you, you've got to fight back and refuse it. And may Yahweh help us to do what is right in His eyes. Every one of us has more overcoming to do. This is the standard we see in His Word. I'm just letting you know what's there. I'm just a delivery boy. And so, brothers, let's rid ourselves from any and all corruption of the world today. No time to waste. If you got to pray, pray. Let's be among those who are unspotted, unstained by the world, cleansed by the blood of the Lamb, renewing ourselves to doing the work of Yahweh, seeking His ways, and He will bring us the good land. When we truly give ourselves and give our lives to the ones who will take us there, we make Him the number one in every aspect of our life, in every day of our life. Then we will be truly fulfilled and blessed to be inheritors of the earth. So when Yahweh takes the throne, and the one who is a pretender is cast away, and the world is ruled by Yahweh, and his righteousness will reign, we will rejoice, because that's the kingdom we've been loving and seeking all along. It's the one that's in our hearts, and the spirit of the world that vexed us will be glad to see it go. Now we've already known, brothers, how much love Yahweh has shown to us through Yahshua the Messiah, who gave his own life for our sakes. Why don't we show our love for him with filling ourselves with his goodness, his purity, his light, his life, and letting him and his spirit in us dwell fully, not the spirit of this world. May Yahweh bless you, and may Yahweh have mercy on each and every one of us.